Welcome back to the Scattered Sheep Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Wade. It is August 29th. Today's episode, we're going back to the wonderful world of false prophet Troy Black. Like I said in the last video, I covered on Troy that I do cover him a lot because he is a dangerous false prophet, and he has over 500,000 subscribers. And I don't necessarily get it. I mean, I guess I do understand a little bit, because he always wraps up his false prophecies in a halfway allowable gospel presentation, or some kind of biblical advice. He sounds very kind of pious, but it's always wrapped up in this absurd false prophecy, and he does that because that's the grift. That's what gets him the clicks. That's what gets him the followers, and that's how he monetizes that consistently. So for those who, for some reason, have not followed so far, what Troy does is he offers a topical prophecy for something that's going on in the world, in the country, what have you, and he pretends that God speaks to him in sentence fragments. It's always these vagaries. For example, a few weeks back, I covered when he claimed that God told him like a shipping ship was somehow going to run into a dock, which, there's hundreds of thousands of shipping ships on the open waters any given day. So the likelihood of something happening was pretty obvious. So it's not prophecy to say the sun is going to come up tomorrow. So, and I might entitle this, Troy Black apparently doesn't think that you have Google, because this prophecy is just borderline stupid. Even though the videos he puts out are like a half an hour in length, he only talks about the prophecy part for like 5 minutes, because that's the shtick. And then he pours over the news over the ensuing 2 months, 6 months, 18 months, however long it takes to find something in the news that can match up to one of the things that he said. So go back and check the video I did about the ship. He literally had 20 different things that he claims God told him. And what he was going to do was he was going to wait until something hit in the news that he can match up to one of those things. And ironically, what hit was later in the day. There was an explosion on a shipping vessel in the Baltimore harbor. Now, it didn't match any of the prophecy, but he did say in the prophecy that the vision God gave him reminded him of the bridge incident at Baltimore harbor last year. So when something happened 4 hours later, he just marketed it like, look, fulfilled prophecy, even though there was nothing fulfilled. None of the 20 things came true. And more importantly, it's like, what's the point? The argument he's trying to make is that, God is telling him these sentence fragments so that he can be lifted up as a false prophet. As a prophet, to be able to somehow pass it off as a sign and wonder that accompanies his preaching of the gospel, which is absurd. If you want to preach the gospel, preach the gospel. If you want to give a salvation message, give a salvation message. You don't have to wrap it up in this pretend, God spoke to me. And he does this literally every day. So he's got the throne room on speed dial. So we're going to disprove yet again ahead of time what Troy's doing with this. God showed me the atmosphere and said national emergency prophecy.
Okay. So this is August 27th. I heard, it's kind of a lengthy prophetic word, but this is what I heard. An agreement will be signed among nations, between the leaders of nations, having to do with the environment and the oxygen we breathe. Oxygen we breathe, that obviously being from the nation's perspective, the oxygen we breathe as humankind.
Okay, so the point I was trying to make about apparently Troy doesn't think that we have Google. I have Google. So immediately what came to mind is, gee, what's in the news about potential environmental agreements that nations could be signing? And a simple Google search reveals that nations will gather for the UN Climate Change Conference, COP30, in Brazil from November 10th to November 21st of this year to work on an environmental agreement to address climate change. So there is no doubt in my mind that whatever agreement the nations come to in November, he's going to come back and pretend that this prophecy was fulfilled. So once again, it's not prophecy to say the sun is going to come up tomorrow. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say Troy read somewhere about this impending UN environmental conference, and he then decided to come out with a prophecy that God showed him that there was going to be an agreement between nations. How prophetic.
Then I heard a side issue will rise to the top suddenly, promoting a national emergency. So if
Yeah, and obviously these events are the things that led to the Paris Accords, right? So there's always side issues when it comes to the environment, and there's always things that come up in the agreement that he'll be able to simply pass off as a fulfilled prophecy.
you're wondering why I'm putting these in quotes, it's because when I heard them, the Lord gives me an impression that this means something slightly other than, or the.
Why would the Lord need to give you an impression? Why can't he just simply say, Troy, I want you to say this, to tell my people this? And this is the stupidity of the grift that he does. And it's amazing to me that he's got 558,000 followers, right? Because God doesn't speak to prophets like this. God's never spoken to prophets like this. Where they're left to somehow piece together what God's actually saying, and they have to put things in quotes.
There's an extra meaning there behind the phrase, right? So that's there's more to the story, right? A side issue will rise to the top suddenly, promoting a national emergency and international discussion leading to an agreement.
An international discussion leading to an agreement is what's intended to happen in November. They're going to get together to try to come up with an agreement.
I heard the Lord say this: I'm putting people forth on this one for a reason. There are future implications, things that need to be put in place today, means soon, not today, but soon, in order to protect the future generation. Some will say this is just a waste, or that it is a conspiracy-focused agenda meant to distort funds and governmental powers and rearrange the opinions of the populace. However,
okay, and let me stop there. If you understand anything about our current politics, whatever agreement is reached by these nations in November involving climate change, you can guarantee that half the country is going to think that it's a bad idea. Half the country gets its news from very corrupt news sources on the right, and their agenda is to basically destroy God's creation. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about, and listen, this is not political, right? If you are paying attention at all and have a functioning brainstem, you cannot tell me that you don't realize that the weather is significantly different than 30 years ago. We never had all of these various new weather events, the horrifically strong hurricanes, the bomb cyclones, the earthquakes in other places, and earthquakes wouldn't be a weather thing, but you had the devastating hurricanes back to back last year. You've got the tsunamis. It doesn't end. I know personally, I live in New York, and winter in New York 30 years ago was started in the beginning of November. Maybe you had a week long of an Indian summer, but for the most part, you can rely on your first snowfall coming in the winter. You never had 70-degree days in January. That's what we have today. So now you can have a discussion about what might be contributing to it or causing it, but you can't deny that the climate has changed. And but there are people whose entire political agenda is to deny it because they want to continue to support the fossil fuel industries and whatnot. So this is not a prophecy that after they agree to something, somebody's going to object to it.
This one truly matters and will matter one day a lot. So the Lord is saying there's this international discussion that's going to take place between leaders of nations, and it's going to start slightly with this quote unquote national emergency that takes place in a certain place, and it's going to have to do with the environment.
By the way, it's not exactly a prophecy again to predict that there might be a national emergency or some kind of, because essentially he's going to use any weather event to trigger that. And since the climate conference is in November, which is still toward the tail end of hurricane season, it's a pretty good bet that he's going to be able to point to some kind of natural disaster. And certainly the people who meet to discuss the climate thing in November are going to be discussing the effects of weather.
Environment is going to have to do with the oxygen we breathe to an extent. And the Lord is saying, like, the things are getting put in place now, and even God is working to put certain things in place where some people will say it's just a conspiracy or there's not much to this, but the Lord is saying, no, at some point it's going to be very important that some of these things are put in place. So although I believe these are going to be some of the leaders that typically make bad decisions, and they're not always making the right decisions for the good of the people, and the good of the planet, things like that. They have a lot of other agendas mixed in. I believe God can even use those leaders to enact his purpose on the earth.
Of course they can. God can use any leader.
And a lot of them are going to be involved, obviously. But this is what I heard the Lord say next. He said, I'm putting the necessary people and decisions in place soon in order to prepare for a future awakening on this subject, where people will realize the truth about what is really going on in the atmosphere. Talking about the earth itself. And then he said, a future at risk, yet made secure through diplomatic signatures.
That's not a prophecy. He knows that there is going to be a climate, the biggest climate conference, in just 2 months from now.
Talking about an agreement, people coming together and agreeing over something. Now, I'll give my opinion on climate change and all that after I should finish sharing the word.
Please don't.
But I heard the Lord say they won't be doing as much as they think they are doing through the current agreement, yet they will be laying the stepping stones for the future, something that needs to take place. Then I heard, I'm bringing in a sidelined country to help promote these talks and get the ball rolling in this. You're going to see a punch through all of a sudden. So this moment of like something getting punched through, and a sidelined country, a country where people thought, well, why would they be involved? Or that's not big enough or dominant enough of a country to be leading this charge, essentially.
So I did another Google search after hearing that part. The COP30 event in November is going to be attended by representatives from 198 countries. So chances are there's going to be a sidelined country involved. Stupidity.
God's going to use it, right? A sidelined nation to be able to help start this. And
the world's first titanium nonstick pan. It's going to blow your hair back. On Mike Miguel.
My opinion on climate change is that a lot of times it's just a phrase thrown around to to try to gain political power.
Yeah, well, maybe you should stay in your lane, Troy. Okay? Maybe you should not be talking about things that you don't understand. I know that concept is foreign to you because you're constantly talking about things you don't understand, like the Bible. You're constantly talking about things that you don't understand, like God is not actually talking to you, right? But you're definitely not a climate scientist, okay? You're a grifter. So it's not, your opinion is irrelevant here. The fact that, it's not quite what it is. Shut up. Just shut up. If you don't know what you're talking about. And by the way, just a quick aside, this is an ongoing problem in our society today, and particularly in the church. Whenever something happens, suddenly everybody thinks they're an expert.
Whatever, or manipulate people or whatever. I think there is some truth to some of it.
Some of it. Well, please regale us there, Troy. What parts of climate change do you think are not? The increased temperatures, all the crazy storms. What part of it that directly affects people? The droughts, the famines. What part of it, Troy?
A lot of it is, exaggerated. And if you look at the data, there's a different story being told.
No. You don't get to do that. You don't get to drop like a silly line. Like if you look at the data, provide the data then, Troy. because you don't have the data, because you're making it up. You're pulling it out of thin air.
Than reality. But in this case, it sounds like the Lord has said, this one truly matters and will matter one day a lot. So it seems like the Lord is addressing a real issue and putting the right people in place and kind of building some stepping stones so that it can be addressed once it becomes known. So very interesting. There's the word. That's something that I'm submitting to you. It is a prophetic word, but it's a word of knowledge, about people.
He does this a lot too, because he doesn't understand the Bible. All right. Is it a prophetic word, or is it a word of knowledge? Okay. And the answer, by the way, it's a false prophetic word. Obviously, it's clearly not a word of knowledge. A word of knowledge, Troy, is if God gives you a word about somebody that you would otherwise not know, and then you tell that to the person as proof that God is speaking. Right. What you're doing is you're pretending that God spoke to you. You're pretending that He spoke these things to you. So you're right. It's a prophetic word, but it's a fake prophetic word. Maybe you want to read about the gifts of the Spirit.
Future events. And so we follow up on these things. They end up on the archive eventually. Very similar to that August pandemic word, which I will be following up on, probably in a video, but also especially it will absolutely be on the archive. So there's that. So this is the message I got.
All right. So that's the extent of the prophecy. By the way, it's a 37-minute video, and 5 minutes of it was the prophecy. But what's the headline? The headline is the prophecy, because that's Troy's grift, right? Because he wants to sell himself as a prophet of God. Except God doesn't talk to His prophets like this. Prophecy doesn't work like this. I would say this is clairvoyance, but that's like an insult to clairvoyance. I'm sorry. This is just absurd. The notion that God is speaking directly through Troy Black to what? To give a prophetic word that countries are going to get together and agree on climate change? When we all know that there is a pending conference on the matter in 2 months? And just mark my words, because I guarantee that whatever comes out of that event, the COP30 in November, Troy's going to come out and do a claim of victory and say, "See, this is God fulfilled His prophetic word, and look at me." And he's going to put it in his prophecy archive, where he puts all the other fake prophecies that he pretends he fulfilled. Go through my archive. There's a great video where I debunk. He did a video claiming 5 fulfilled Trump prophecies, and none of them were fulfilled. Check the one from a few weeks ago about the boat, about the shipping vessel. He listed 20 different things, and none of them came true. Why would God speak to anybody like that and bring that word to the church, to the body of Christ? So, anyway, mark and avoid. This guy is just bad news. You have to understand that this is not how. It's a mockery of the Holy Spirit. It's a mockery of God. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments in the comments section. I try to get back, reply to everybody. Test everything and hold fast.